A young woman begins to experience a persistent pain in her neck and mentions it to her boyfriend. But when he takes a closer look at her neck, what he saw immediately made him call 911. Emmy Collett sat on the couch after a long day at work, absent-mindedly rubbing her neck. A dull pain had been nagging her for weeks, and she couldn't shake the discomfort. It had been subtle at first, but was growing more painful as time went on. Ever the optimist, she had tried to ignore it, attributing it to stress or muscle tension. She had a lot on her plate after all, but today it was becoming intolerable. She tried massaging it and placing a heat pack on it, but the pain didn't improve. She carried on rubbing the sore spot while thinking about what else might help. Emmy's boyfriend, Jake Coates, wandered into the kitchen, humming to himself as he prepared tea. They had rekindled their childhood romance just a year ago, and their relationship was full of hope and excitement for the future. They had even got engaged recently and were now planning their dream wedding. Emmy looked over to where Jake was pouring the hot water into the mugs and decided to tell him. The pain was too much to hide. Little did she know that complaining about the issue with her neck would change everything and make Jake immediately call 911. Emmy had always been a picture of health. She was active, vibrant, and full of life. She had never been one to complain about minor aches or pains, always maintaining her cheerful disposition. But over the past few months, something had changed. Jake had also noticed that something wasn't quite right, and hoped she would open up to him about what was happening soon. As he walked into the living room and handed her the tea, he saw her rubbing her neck and thought she looked a bit pale. He was worried about their big bike ride tomorrow. As passionate members of the community, Emmy and Jakes were planning to partake in a charity cycle ride to raise money and awareness for cancer, a cause Emmy had previously volunteered for. The ride was taking place tomorrow, and while Emmy was excited about the cause, the neck pain was persistently disturbing her. She finally voiced her concerns. "Jake, this pain in my neck, it just won't go away," she admitted. Her voice tinged with frustration. She had kept it to herself for so long, hoping it would disappear on its own, but now it was clear it would not. She had been scared to acknowledge that something was wrong. She loved her job as a primary school teacher, where she found joy in the laughter and innocence of her students, and she was eagerly planning her wedding with her childhood sweetheart, Jake Coates. Life seemed perfect, and she had big dreams for the future. She did not want things to change, so she had ignored the bad feeling in her gut. But the pain was getting too much. Jake walked over, concern etched on his face. "Let me take a look," he said, gently brushing her hair aside to get a better view. As he examined her neck, something caught his eye. A small lump, just below her skin at the front of her neck. His heart skipped a beat. "Emmy, have you noticed this lump before?" Jake asked, slightly concerned. Emmy frowned, her fingers brushing over the spot where Jake was pointing. "I've felt this discomfort for a while," she admitted softly. "It started as just an occasional ache, something I thought was stress. But over the past few months, it's been getting worse. I've tried everything, massages, heat packs, painkillers, but nothing seems to help." She paused as if weighing whether to continue. "I didn't want to worry you, so I just kept pushing through it, hoping it would go away." Jake hesitated, worry bubbling beneath his calm exterior. As a professional emergency medical technician, he knew the signs and symptoms that shouldn't be ignored, but he also didn't want to alarm her unnecessarily. He chose his words carefully. "Emmy, I think it's important we get this checked out soon. It's probably nothing, but it's better to be sure." Emmy shook her head gently, her voice soft but firm. "Jake, I know you're worried, but tomorrow's ride means a lot to me. Let's not make a fuss about it right now. I'll see a doctor afterward." Jake nodded, respecting her wishes but unable to shake the unease in his gut. The lump was small, but it was there, and it didn't feel right. He decided not to push further for now. But as Emmy sat back down, her thoughts drifted to the past 2 years. "You know," she began, her voice quiet, "I've been dealing with odd symptoms for a while now. It started about 2 years ago, just little things at first. I thought it was irritable bowel syndrome. I'd get cramps and bloating, and I had to rush to the bathroom constantly. It was embarrassing and exhausting." She sighed, her frustration evident. "I went to the doctor several times, but they kept brushing me off. It's just stress, they said. Take some supplements. Change your diet." I tried everything, but nothing seemed to help. I reached a point where I was going to the bathroom every 15 minutes at work. It was so disruptive, especially with the kids. But no matter what I said, the doctors didn't take me seriously. Jake listened intently, a frown creasing his brow. He hadn't realized how much she had been struggling. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emmy shrugged, a sad smile on her lips. "I didn't want to nag you over something so irrelevant. I felt silly, like I was making a big deal out of nothing. Even when I had to go to the hospital during a school trip because of a really bad period, they just ran some blood tests and told me everything was fine. I started to think maybe I was just imagining it. Jake's frown deepened as he listened to Emmy recount her experiences. He couldn't believe she had been dealing with so much on her own. The thought of her suffering in silence, trying to brush off symptoms that might be pointing to something serious, made his heart ache. "Emmy, I know you've been through a lot with the doctors before," Jake said, his voice gentle but insistent. "But this is different. I don't want to scare you, but I really think we should take this seriously." Emmy looked into Jake's eyes, seeing the concern etched in his features. She knew he was right, but the thought of missing the charity ride was hard to accept. "I understand, but tomorrow's ride is important to me. It's the last thing I'll do as a single woman before we get married. I just want to feel like myself for a little while longer, you know?" Jake nodded, understanding the significance of the ride for her. But the worry gnawed at him, persistent and unyielding. He didn't want to push her, but the nagging feeling that something was wrong kept him on edge. "All right," Jake said, trying to mask his concern with a reassuring smile. "But promise me, if anything feels off tomorrow, we won't hesitate to stop and get help." Emmy smiled back, appreciating his understanding. "I promise," she said, though deep down a small part of her still tried to dismiss the growing anxiety in the pit of her stomach. As they prepared for bed that night, Jake couldn't help but glance at the lump on her neck again. It was small, barely noticeable, but it felt like a ticking time bomb to him. He lay awake long after Emmy had fallen asleep, his mind racing with thoughts of what could go wrong. The next morning, as the sun crept over the horizon, Emmy and Jake prepared for the charity ride. Emmy, usually a bright and energetic presence, seemed unusually subdued. Her face was paler than usual, and the tiredness in her eyes was impossible to ignore. She moved more slowly, clearly in discomfort, and with every turn of her neck, she seemed to wince in pain. Jake's unease grew with every passing minute. Finally, unable to shake the dread that something was terribly wrong, he approached Emmy as she adjusted her helmet. "Emmy, I need to check your neck again," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. She sighed, but there was no resistance this time. She tilted her head for a full examination. The lump on her neck seemed to have grown overnight, and her skin was flushed, almost as if she had a fever. His concern quickly turned to panic. After he spots this on her neck, he immediately calls 911. "Emmy, we need to go to the hospital, now," Jake said, his voice urgent. Emmy, still determined to participate in the ride, hesitated. She had been looking forward to this event for months, but the look in Jake's eyes told her that this was more serious than she had wanted to admit. Before she could fully process it, Jake had already made the decision. He picked up his phone and dialed 911, his tone firm as he explained the situation. "We need an ambulance right away. My girlfriend has a lump on her neck that's growing and she's not feeling well." As they waited for the ambulance, Jake's mind wandered back to their past. He remembered the first time they met as children. The awkward teenage years when their friendship blossomed into something more. They had drifted apart in college, life pulling them in different directions, but fate brought them back together. Just a year ago, they rekindled what they had lost, finding comfort and love in each other again. Jake had always known that Emmy was the one, his lobster, as they used to joke, referencing the old TV show they both loved. He couldn't shake the fear gnawing at him now. The thought of losing her was unbearable. The sound of the ambulance siren grew louder as it approached the house, a stark contrast to the otherwise quiet morning. Jake had been pacing the living room, his eyes darting back to Emmy, who sat on the couch, trying to remain composed despite the growing pain in her neck. The realization that this was more than just a minor issue hit them both hard, and now the ambulance's arrival only intensified the situation. When the paramedics entered the house, their movements were swift yet measured, a practiced calm in their demeanor. As a professional EMT, Jake knew the routine, but it felt different now, more personal, more urgent. "Where is she?" one of the paramedics asked. "Here," Jake replied, leading them to Emmy, who was sitting up, her hands still resting on the lump in her neck. "She's got a lump that's grown overnight, and she's been in a lot of pain. I'm worried it could be something serious." The paramedics nodded, their faces focused as they quickly assessed Emmy's condition. One of them crouched down beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you tell me how you're feeling right now? Any other symptoms besides the neck pain?" Emmy swallowed hard, her voice quieter than usual. "It started as just a dull ache, but it's been getting worse. Now it's spreading down my shoulders, and I'm so tired. More tired than I've ever been." The paramedic nodded. "We're going to take you to the hospital just to be safe. Let's get you on the stretcher, all right?" The ambulance ride to the hospital was tense. Jake held Emmy's hand tightly, his mind racing with fear and uncertainty. He kept glancing at her, noticing how pale she had become, how the pain seemed to weigh her down more with each passing moment. Emmy tried to smile, to reassure him, but the pain in her neck was now relentless, spreading like a shadow over her once bright spirit. When they arrived at the hospital, the paramedics carefully transferred Emmy onto a stretcher, wheeling her through the busy corridors. Jake stayed by her side, his heart pounding as they were taken to the emergency room. It wasn't long before a nurse came in to check on Emmy. After what seemed like hours, the doctor finally arrived, his expression serious as he reviewed the initial assessments. He listened intently as Emmy explained how the lump on her neck had suddenly grown, how the pain had become unbearable. The doctor ordered a series of tests, including blood work and imaging scans, to determine the nature of the lump. He spoke calmly, but Jake could sense the urgency behind his words. They both knew that time was of the essence. As they waited for the results, Emmy's condition seemed to worsen. The fatigue was overwhelming, and the pain in her neck had spread further down her spine. Jake could barely contain his fear, but he remained steadfast by her side, offering her whatever comfort he could. Finally, the doctor returned with the results, and his face was more somber than before. He sat down next to Emmy and Jake, taking a deep breath before delivering the news that would change their lives forever. "Emmy, the tests have confirmed that you have medullary thyroid cancer," he said gently, his voice filled with empathy. The doctor informed them that medullary thyroid cancer was different from other thyroid cancers. "It's a neuroendocrine tumor, which means it originates in cells that function like nerve cells and hormone-producing cells," he explained. "The cancer has likely been growing for years, unnoticed, until it reached a stage where it began causing the symptoms you've been experiencing, Emmy." The words hit them like a tidal wave. Emmy felt her world shift as the reality of the diagnosis set in. Jake's grip on her hand tightened, his heart breaking as he watched the shock and fear wash over her. The doctor continued, explaining the severity of the situation and the immediate need for treatment. "We'll need to start treatment right away. This will include surgery to remove the thyroid, followed by radiation and possibly chemotherapy. We'll also need to monitor your calcitonin levels closely to track the cancer's progress." As Emmy and Jake sat in the sterile hospital room, absorbing the news, they felt like their world had shattered. The life they had planned together, the future they had dreamed of, seemed to hang by a thread. But even in the face of this devastating diagnosis, Emmy remained remarkably strong. "I'm not going to let this stop me," she told Jake, her voice filled with determination. "We have so much to live for, and I'm going to fight this with everything I've got." Jake squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with tears. "We're in this together, Emmy. Every step of the way." As the weeks passed, Emmy began her treatment at the Royal Marsden Hospital, where she had once volunteered. The staff, who knew her as someone caring and dedicated, now supported her in every way they could, offering not just medical care but also the emotional support she needed. The familiar faces and kind words from the nurses and doctors helped Emmy and Jake through these tough times. Emmy's condition was serious. The doctors explained that her medullary thyroid cancer was rare, with only 300 cases recorded in the UK over the last 12 years. Her prognosis was grim. She had a 20% chance of surviving the next 5 years. The high levels of a hormone called calcitonin, excreted from her thyroid cancer cells, were causing her severe bowel problems and extreme tiredness. The calcitonin levels for a normal person are less than 10, but hers were almost at 12,000, so it was no wonder she was experiencing such severe symptoms. Unfortunately, the treatment for her condition, which included chemotherapy and radiation, came with its own set of challenges. The hardest news for Emmy was that, due to the treatments, she would never be able to have children. Despite everything, Emmy was determined not to let this diagnosis define her. She was a fighter, and with Jake by her side, she was determined to make the most of her time. Even with the pain and fatigue, Emmy remained optimistic and full of life. Her love for Jake and her desire to live every moment to the fullest gave her strength. Emmy and Jake decided to channel this strength into their charity work. They had always loved helping others, and now they focused on raising money for the hospital that was treating Emmy. They planned a 2,000-mile tandem bike ride challenge, calling it the Tandemonium Challenge. Their bike, which they named Tara after one of Emmy's favorite nurses, became a symbol of their hope and determination. Emmy and Jake were surrounded by well-wishers on the morning of the ride. Family, friends, and even some of Emmy's students had come to cheer them on. Emmy, usually shy, was deeply touched by the outpouring of love and support. "People waste so many years of their life being miserable," she said in an interview. You could be hit by a bus tomorrow. Life is so short, and we are determined to enjoy it. But just when things seemed to be looking up, another twist emerged. During a routine checkup, the doctors discovered that the cancer had spread further than they initially thought. It had reached her spine, her lungs, her liver, and her bones. The news was crushing. Jake, who had been by her side every step of the way, was devastated, but he refused to give up hope. "We've come this far, Emmy," he said. "We're not giving up now. We're going to keep fighting, and we're going to keep living." And fight they did. Emmy continued her treatment, and she and Jake continued their charity work, raising awareness and funds for cancer research. They knew that their time together might be limited, but they were determined to make every moment count. In the end, Emmy's story is one of incredible strength and resilience. Despite the odds, she refused to let her diagnosis define her. She and Jake faced the challenges together, with love and determination, proving that even in the darkest times there is always hope. What an emotional journey. Have you or a loved one ever faced a serious health challenge? How did you cope with it? Share your story in the comments below. And remember to cherish every moment with those you love. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.